Rain hammered against the glass the night the lock on my front door splintered. I had spent 5 years masking my scent, hiding in the shadows, protecting the small boy clinging to my leg. But you can't hide a pup from a ruthless alpha. Caleb Montgomery had finally found us. 5 years. That is exactly 1,825 days of looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows, and scrubbing my skin raw with chemical scent neutralizers. When you are an unmarked Omega on the run from the air to the West Coast's most notoriously violent logistics empire, paranoia isn't just a habit, it's a survival mechanism. My name is Asher. To the quiet, unsuspecting residents of Oak Ridge, Oregon, I was just a freelance graphic designer and a single father doing his best. To the underground world, I had fled. I was a ghost. I looked down at Leo, who was currently sitting on the faded rug of our cramped living room, intensely focused on snapping a pair of plastic building blocks together. He was a beautiful boy, soft, unruly curls that mirrored my own, but the eyes, those cold, piercing, storm-grey eyes, belonged entirely to his father. Even at 4 turning 5 next month, Leo possessed a presence that was far too heavy for a toddler. When he was upset, the air in the room would grow thick, a rudimentary projection of alpha pheromones that scent blockers could barely contain. You can't outrun biology, Asher. My only confidant, Noah, had warned me over a burner phone last week. He's an alpha pup born from a prime bloodline. Soon a simple pediatrician's visit is going to flag his genetics in a database. You need a better plan. Noah was right, but acknowledging reality didn't make it easier to swallow. My mind drifted back to the night that ruined and remade my life. I was 22, working as a server at an exclusive underground club in Seattle, the kind of place where Omegas were treated as decorative commodities. Caleb Montgomery was 26, freshly appointed as the head of his family's acquisitions department. He was terrifying, a prime alpha who didn't just walk into a room, but suffocated it with the scent of bitter cedar ozone and cold dominance. We weren't supposed to interact, but a sudden violent spike in my heat cycle triggered by a malfunctioning suppressive implant had left me helpless in a secluded VIP corridor. Caleb had found me. What was supposed to be a ruthless man calling security turned into a feral, desperate blur of skin teeth and raw instinct. He hadn't marked me. He had fought his rut-crazed instincts just enough to spare my neck, knowing a bite would tie a Montgomery to a nobody. But he hadn't used protection either. When I woke up bruised and reeking of his overwhelming scent, I overheard his father, Arthur Montgomery, outside the door. Arthur was ordering his fixer to dispose of the distraction before Caleb woke up. I didn't wait to find out how they planned to dispose of me. I crawled out a 3rd-story bathroom window, fell onto a fire escape, and vanished into the rainy night. 3 weeks later, I was staring at a positive test in a dingy motel bathroom. Back in the present, the shrill ring of my cell phone shattered the quiet of the apartment, pulling me from my memories. I checked the caller ID. It was Dr. Harrison Leo's pediatrician. Asher, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Dr. Harrison's voice trembled slightly. He was a beta, usually calm and composed, but today he sounded completely unspooled. What's wrong, doctor? Are Leo's blood test results back? They are. And Asher, there's been a breach. The clinic's third-party diagnostic server was compromised last night by a sophisticated ransomware attack. But it wasn't a standard encryption sweep. They selectively extracted files. My blood ran cold. The phone felt like a block of ice against my ear. What are you saying? Leo's genetic markers, the ones indicating his prime alpha lineage. They were flagged in the system yesterday morning to order specialized suppressants. Last night, the data was stolen. Whoever took it wasn't looking for credit card numbers. They were looking for a specific DNA sequence. The room spun. I dropped the phone, the plastic clattering against the hardwood floor. Leo looked up, his small brows furrowing in concern. He dropped his blocks and toddled over, wrapping his arms around my knee. Daddy sat. He mumbled, his scent spiking with a protective, earthy aroma that was impossibly strong for a child. I didn't have time to be sad. I only had time to run. The Montgomery family didn't just have money. They had an army of private contractors, hackers and fixers. If they had Leo's DNA profile, they knew he existed. And if they knew Caleb had an heir, they would tear the earth apart to claim him and erase the Omega who had kept him hidden. Paranoia became a suffocating reality within hours. I threw our lives into 2 canvas duffel bags, passports, forged cash, stored in a floorboard stash, and clothes. I ignored the toys, ignored the sentimental photos on the fridge. Survival meant traveling light. The rain outside had evolved into a torrential downpour, the kind of coastal storm that wiped out visibility and knocked out power grids. It was a perfect night to disappear, or a perfect night to be hunted. I zipped the second bag shut, my hands shaking violently. My internal Omega instincts were screaming at me, a primal alarm bell ringing in my skull. Danger. Predator. Close. My burner phone buzzed on the mattress. Noah. Tell me you're in the car. Noah barked the second I answered. I'm leaving the apartment right now. I just finished packing. You're out of time, Ash. I just intercepted a chatter frequency on the police scanner. 3 black, unregistered SUVs bypassed the highway toll cameras 10 miles outside of Oak Ridge. They're running tactical comms. It's him. It's Caleb's personal retrieval unit. How did he get here so fast? I choked out, hoisting the duffel bag over my shoulder and grabbing Leo's small hand. He didn't just get the DNA ping today, Asher. He must have been tracking the clinic the moment the blood was drawn. He's been hunting you. Get out the back window. Now. I hung up, tossing the phone onto the bed. I scooped Leo up into my arms. He whined, sensing my terror, his small hands gripping my sweater. Shh, baby. We're going to play a game. The quiet game. Remember. I hurried toward the kitchen, aiming for the fire escape that led down to the alley where my beat-up sedan was parked. But before my hand even touched the latch of the window, the atmosphere in the apartment shifted. It wasn't a sound at first. It was a physical pressure. The air grew dense, heavy, and practically vibrating with pheromones. Even over the metallic tang of my scent blockers, a terrifyingly familiar scent bled under the crack of my front door. Bitter cedar. Ozone. The smell of an oncoming storm. My knees actually buckled. My Omega biology dormant and starved of an alpha's presence for 5 years betrayed me, instantly turning my limbs to lead. Leo buried his face in my neck, whimpering softly as the oppressive alpha aura blanketed the room. Thud. Heavy footsteps halted right outside my door. Open the door, Asher. The voice was deep, resonant, and laced with a deadly calm that sent a shockwave of pure terror down my spine. It was Caleb. He wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. The command was woven with an alpha frequency that commanded absolute submission. I couldn't speak. I backed away, clutching my son tighter, moving toward the window. Crack. The first kick landed against the solid oak door. The frame splintered, dust raining down from the hinges. I fumbled with the window lock, my fingers slick with sweat. Crack. The deadbolt snapped like a dry twig. The heavy door flew inward, slamming violently against the drywall and knocking a framed print to the floor with a shower of glass. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the massive silhouette filling my doorway. Caleb Montgomery stepped into the apartment. He looked older, harder, and infinitely more dangerous than the man I remembered. He wore a dark, bespoke suit, completely ruined by the rain, his broad shoulders heaving slightly. His storm-grey eyes swept the room, cataloguing the packed bags, the open window, and finally locking dead onto me. "Did you honestly think?" Caleb's voice was a low, lethal purr as he took a slow step forward. "That you could take what belongs to me and just disappear?" "Stay back!" I screamed, my voice cracking, entirely lacking the authority I desperately needed. "You have no right to be here. He's mine." Caleb didn't stop. He closed the distance with predatory grace, kicking a duffel bag out of his path. The sheer density of his pheromones was agonizing, designed to force an Omega to their knees. But I stayed standing, fueled purely by a mother's desperation to protect their pup. Caleb stopped 3 feet away. For the first time, his gaze dropped from my face to the trembling child in my arms. I saw the exact moment, the ruthless, stone-cold mafia air, shattered. Caleb's breath hitched. His eyes widened, the storm-grey pupils dilating wildly as they locked onto Leo's matching gaze. The oppressive, terrifying scent of ozone and anger suddenly shifted, softening into something devastatingly hollow and agonizingly sad. "A son," Caleb whispered, his voice cracking, entirely stripped of its alpha command. He reached a trembling hand out, hovering just inches from Leo's back. "Don't touch him," I hissed, turning slightly to shield the boy. "Your father wanted me dead. He wanted the distraction gone." "I know how your family operates, Caleb. I won't let you turn my son into a monster or kill him to protect your bloodline." Caleb's head snapped up. The sadness in his eyes was instantly replaced by a burning, furious fire that made me flinch. But the anger wasn't directed at me. "My father," Caleb said, his voice dropping to a gravelly, deadly octave, "has been dead for 4 years, Asher. I put a bullet in his chest the day I found out he ordered a hit on you." My heart stopped. The room spun wildly. "What?" I breathed out, the revelation hitting me harder than a physical blow. "I tore my own syndicate apart looking for you." Caleb stepped closer, his scent wrapping around me, warm and desperately possessive. "I went half feral without my fated mate. And you've been sitting here, raising my air in a 2-bedroom apartment, thinking I wanted you dead." Before I could process the magnitude of his words, the sound of screeching tires echoed from the street below, followed by the heavy metallic clatter of automatic weapons being cocked. Caleb's demeanor instantly hardened. He drew a heavy matte black handgun from his shoulder holster, pushing me and Leo roughly behind his broad back. "My father might be dead," Caleb growled, his eyes fixed on the broken doorway. "But his loyalists aren't, and they followed me here. Get down, Asher." Now. Gunfire erupted, shattering the fragile tension in the room and tearing through the drywall like paper. Deafening cracks echoed as high-caliber rounds from the hallway shredded my modest apartment. The framed photos on the walls exploded into shrapnel. I hit the floor, curling my body entirely over Leo, who let out a piercing, terrified wail. Caleb didn't flinch. He moved with a terrifying predatory fluidity. Standing his ground in the fatal funnel of the shattered doorway, he returned fire with his matte black Sig Sauer P226, his shots measured precise and deadly. 3 heavy thuds sounded from the corridor, the unmistakable noise of bodies hitting the floorboards. "Move!" Caleb roared, his voice thick with an alpha's absolute command. He grabbed the collar of my sweater, hauling me and my sobbing son to our feet. To the fire escape, Asher. Now. I didn't argue. The scent of bitter cedar and ozone was now laced with the acrid stench of cordite and copper. I scrambled toward the kitchen window, shoving it open against the howling wind and torrential rain. "Daddy, I'm scared," Leo cried, burying his wet face into my neck. "I've got you, pup. I've got you," I murmured, climbing out onto the rusted iron grate. Caleb backed into the kitchen, providing cover fire, as more shouts echoed from the stairwell. He slammed the kitchen door shut, locking the deadbolt, and vaulted through the window, just as a spray of bullets turned the wooden door into splinters. "Down the stairs, keep your head tucked," Caleb ordered, shielding us with his massive frame. The freezing rain soaked us instantly, washing away the scent blockers I had applied that morning. Unmasked, my natural omega scent, sweet fig and vanilla, bloomed into the cold air. Caleb groaned a raw, guttural sound that vibrated in his chest. His eyes flashed a luminous feral silver in the darkness. 5 years! He panted, his hand gripping my waist to steady me on the slick metal steps. "I've been looking for that scent for 5 years. Focus on keeping us alive, Montgomery." I snapped through my treacherous body, leaned into his touch, starved for the grounding presence of my fated mate. We reached the dark, trash-strewn alley. My beat-up sedan was parked 20 yards away, but a sleek black Mercedes-Benz G-Class sat idling directly blocking my exit. 2 men in tactical gear stepped out from the shadows of the dumpster, raising suppressed submachine guns. Before I could even scream, Caleb pushed me behind a brick pillar. He didn't hesitate. He engaged them with the brutal, calculated efficiency of an ex-academy military contractor. 2 rapid shots dropped the first man. The second man fired a wild burst, the bullets sparking against the brickwork mere inches from my face. Caleb lunged, closing the distance impossibly fast, and disarmed the operative with a sickening crunch of bone before putting a final round through his chest. "The SUV!" Caleb shouted over the roaring storm. "It's mine! Get in the back!" I bolted for the Mercedes, pulling the heavy door open. The interior was pristine, smelling heavily of Caleb's cedar scent. I buckled Leo into the middle seat, my hands shaking so violently I could barely work the clasp. Caleb slid into the driver's seat, slamming the vehicle into gear. The tires shrieked against the wet asphalt as we tore out of the alley, leaving my old life and the bleeding bodies of Arthur Montgomery's loyalists behind in the rear-view mirror. The silence inside the cabin was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic thumping of the windshield wipers and Leo's soft, exhausted hiccups. The armored Inca's plating of the vehicle offered a deceptive sense of security as we sped down the deserted coastal highway. I sat in the back, holding Leo's hand, but my eyes were glued to the rearview mirror, watching Caleb. His jaw was clenched so tight the muscles feathered beneath his bruised skin. But what caught my attention was the dark, glistening stain spreading across the right shoulder of his ruined suit jacket. "You're bleeding," I stated, my voice remarkably steady, despite the adrenaline crash threatening to pull me under. "It's a graze. I'll live," Caleb muttered, his eyes scanning the dark road ahead. "You're losing a lot of blood for a graze." I unbuckled my seatbelt, leaning over the center console. My Omega instincts, previously hijacked by terror, were now forcefully pivoting toward nurturing. I tore the fabric of my sleeve, pressing it firmly against the wound on his shoulder. Caleb sucked in a sharp breath. His hand left the steering wheel, his large, calloused fingers wrapping around my wrist. He didn't push me away. Instead, he leaned his head back slightly, his stormy eyes meeting mine in the mirror. "Why didn't you come to me, Asher?" The rawness in his voice was devastating. The ruthless syndicate boss was entirely gone, replaced by a desperate, grieving alpha. "When you found out you were pregnant, why did you run?" "I told you," I whispered, holding the makeshift bandage in place. "I heard your father talking to his fixer. He called me a distraction. He said I needed to be disposed of. I was a nobody, Caleb. A rogue Omega who caught the heir to the West Coast Syndicate during a rut. What was I supposed to do? Wait for a bullet?" I would have burned the city to the ground before I let anyone touch a hair on your head." Caleb growled, the vehicle swerving slightly as his anger spiked. "You are my fated mate, Asher. I knew it the second I touched you in that corridor. My father knew it too. That's why he wanted you gone. He knew I would never agree to the political marriage he arranged if I had you." The revelation hit me like a physical weight. Fated mates. It was a fairy tale concept, something whispered about in Omega support groups but rarely proven. Yet looking at him now, feeling the impossible magnetic pull of his aura, I knew it was true. "When I woke up and you were gone," Caleb continued, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper, "I tore the estate apart. I interrogated every guard. When I found out my father ordered the hit, I didn't hesitate. I walked into his office, and I ended his reign. I took over the syndicate that same day. But they're still hunting us," I countered, gesturing to the bullet holes spiderwebbing the armored glass. "Gideon Croft." Caleb spat the name like poison. "My father's former right-hand man. He went into hiding after I took over. He's been rallying the old guard, waiting for a moment of weakness. Finding out I had a hidden Omega and an unregistered heir, that was his golden ticket to challenge my claim as Alpha." I looked down at Leo, who had finally fallen asleep against the leather seats, his small chest rising and falling evenly. "So what happens now?" "Now," Caleb said, turning the steering wheel, sharply navigating the SUV off the main highway and onto a concealed, heavily wooded private road. "We go home, and I end Gideon Croft." Concrete walls and reinforced steel barricades replaced the chaotic storm-soaked highway as we descended deep into the earth. Caleb's safe house wasn't a mere cabin in the Oregon mountains. It was a state-of-the-art subterranean fortress designed to withstand a siege. Heavy blast doors hissed shut behind the armored SUV, sealing us away from the torrential rain, the screeching tires, and the lingering threat of Arthur Montgomery's surviving loyalists. Fluorescent lights flickered to life, illuminating a cavernous underground garage populated by a dozen heavily armed guards. They snapped to attention the moment Caleb stepped out of the vehicle. He didn't acknowledge them, his singular focus completely locked on me and the sleeping child in my arms. "Infirmary. Now," Caleb barked, his voice echoing off the concrete. Wyatt, a soft-spoken beta medic with quick hands and a calm demeanor, practically sprinted down the corridor to meet us. He ushered us into a sterile, blindingly white medical bay, equipped better than most city hospitals. The sharp clinical scent of antiseptic threatened to drown out Caleb's grounding cedar pheromones, making my Omega instincts spike with unease. I clutched Leo tighter to my chest, retreating to a plush leather recovery cot in the corner of the room. Wyatt immediately went to work, cutting away the ruined, blood-soaked fabric of Caleb's bespoke suit jacket. The bullet had taken a vicious gouge out of his thick shoulder, leaving a jagged, angrily weeping trench of torn muscle. Caleb didn't so much as wince as the medic poured raw alcohol over the wound. His storm-grey eyes remained fixed on me, tracking my every breath, my every minute flinch, as if he were memorizing the rhythm of my pulse. "He needs a pediatric evaluation. Wyatt," Caleb commanded, ignoring the needle piercing his skin as the medic began stitching him up. "Full vitals. Check his hearing. The gunfire was too close." "I'm perfectly fine, and so is he." I interrupted, my voice trembling slightly as the adrenaline finally began to drain from my system. "He just needs to sleep, Caleb." "We both do." Caleb dismissed Wyatt with a sharp nod the moment the final stitch was tied off. The heavy steel door clicked shut, leaving the three of us alone in the deafening quiet of the underground bunker. Caleb wiped a smear of blood from his jaw, his movement stiff and deliberate, before crossing the room. He didn't tower over us. Instead, this terrifying, ruthless syndicate, boss a man who had just snapped an operative's neck with his bare hands, dropped to his knees on the cold tile floor. He brought himself entirely down to our level, bowing his head in a raw, staggering display of alpha submission. Leo stirred against my chest. The little boy blinked, his heavy eyelids fluttering open to reveal those striking, tempestuous grey eyes. He looked at Caleb, tilting his head with innocent curiosity. "You're the big man from the door," Leo whispered, his voice thick with sleep. "I am," Caleb replied, his voice cracking violently. He raised a massive calloused hand, trembling as he gently brushed a stray curl away from Leo's forehead. "I'm your father, little wolf. I'm so incredibly sorry it took me this long to find you." Leo didn't pull away. Instead, his small hand reached out his tiny fingers, wrapping around Caleb's thumb. The earthy, pure scent of an alpha pup bloomed in the room, reaching out to tangle with Caleb's bitter cedar. It was a biological recognition, a fundamental claiming of bloodline and bond that no amount of time or distance could sever. Caleb let out a shaky breath, burying his face in his free hand, as a single, silent tear tracked through the dirt and gunpowder residue on his cheek. Watching him break down shattered the last remaining walls around my heart. I was so terrified, I confessed softly the truth spilling out of me. For 5 years, every time a car idled too long outside, every time a shadow moved in the alley, I thought it was your father's men coming to finish the job. Caleb looked up, his eyes burning with a fierce, uncompromising fire. "That life of fear is over, Asher. I am dismantling the old regime, brick by brick. You are my fated mate, and I will be damned before I let anyone force you into the shadows again. I operate by a strict code, but for you I am rewriting every single rule." He listed his promises with deadly serious conviction. "Absolute authority. You are my equal in every regard. My empire is your empire. No one questions your orders. Impenetrable security. An elite hand-picked detail will shadow you both. Gideon's remaining loyalists will be hunted down to the last man. Unbreakable transparency. You will never be kept in the dark again. My secrets are yours. My life is yours. I don't need an empire, Caleb." I breathed out, reaching forward to cup his bruised jaw. "I just need you. I need us to be safe." "You have me," Caleb swore, leaning into my touch. "Body, blood, and soul." Before he could lean in to seal the promise with a kiss, the encrypted tactical radio resting on the stainless steel counter buzzed to life. The sharp burst of static shattered the fragile intimacy. Caleb sighed, a flash of irritation crossing his features as he stood to retrieve it. "Report." Caleb answered, his tone instantly shifting back to glacial authority. I watched his expression transform. The tender, grieving father vanished, replaced entirely by the apex predator who ruled the underworld. A dark, terrifying smirk curved his lips, a look that promised absolute devastation. "Is that so?" Caleb murmured into the receiver, his eyes locking onto mine. "Secure him in the lowest holding level. Strap him to the chair. I want him fully conscious and lucid when I walk into that room." He killed the radio connection, tossing the device back onto the counter. "What is it?" I asked, pulling Leo instinctively closer, though my panic had dulled significantly. "My extraction team," Caleb said smoothly, adjusting the cuffs of his blood-stained shirt. "They caught Gideon Croft attempting to board a private charter out of Seattle. He is currently a very unwilling guest in our basement." A shiver ran down my spine. "What are you going to do to him?" Caleb walked back over, leaning down to press a soft, lingering kiss to my forehead, then another to Leo's hair. I am going to make a very slow, very permanent example out of him, Asher. I am going to ensure that every single rat hiding in the shadows of the West Coast understands exactly what happens when they threaten my mate and my son. As he turned and walked out the heavy steel door, the locking mechanism engaging behind him to seal us in perfect safety, I realized the profound shift in my reality. I had spent half a decade running from the monsters in the dark. Now the most terrifying, ruthless monster of them all belonged to me, and he was currently tearing apart the world to keep us safe. I closed my eyes, inhaling the lingering scent of cedar and ozone, and finally let myself rest. Wow, what a thrilling journey of survival, fated mates and unyielding protection. Asher and Caleb's intense story proves that you can never truly outrun your destiny, especially when a ruthless alpha is determined to claim his family. Did the plot twist about Caleb's father leave you speechless? Let me know your favorite dramatic moment in the comments below. If you enjoyed this heart-pounding Omegaverse drama, please hit that like button, share it with your fellow drama lovers, and subscribe for more captivating, intense stories.